Moving on to a local topic here, right here up the road in Raleigh, North Carolina. A black owned bookstore by the name of Liberation Station Bookstore is closing its doors due to what the owner has called racism threats and threats of violence against the bookstore. And Baba Makaru made us aware of this um, this past weekend. And so we see this black bookstore, which was a children's bookstore, um, having to move from its downtown location on Fayetteville Street in Raleigh, North Carolina. Baba Makaru, you want to talk more about this?
Yes, I do. This is this is a very interesting situation because one of the first things you hear about African people, black people here in the United States is we don't read. So it's very interesting. I've posed the question. I mean, what threat does a children's bookstore pose? To the white supremacy dynamic. So the Liberation Station Bookstore, North Carolina's first black-owned children's bookstore, is moving out of its downtown location after less than a year in operation due to multiple threats received by the owner. The bookstore, which opened its doors on June 20 in June on Juneteenth of 2023, has become a hub for children's literature written and illustrated by Black and underrepresented authors. However, the owner, Victoria Scott Miller, revealed that the decision to relocate stemmed from ongoing threats targeting her and her family. I mean, they have received threats. She even received threats where the people actually named her young son and said that they were watching him. I mean, these are obviously some pathological people driven by white supremacy. Uh, Living while black is a threat to the raw elements of the white supremacy dynamic. Anything positive black is even more of a threat. These elements are part of what I call the new redeemers, modeled after the white redeemers who overthrew Reconstruction. Of course, we remember during the Black Liberation Movement, COINTELPRO targeted Black-owned bookstores for surveillance. Now, I don't think these threats are at that level. I think this is more at the level of the raw elements of the white supremacy dynamic. But I just find it very interesting that they would target this bookstore. Now, some people might say, well, you know, a bookstore poses no threat. But we have to understand that historically we're dealing with people who have done everything possible to control the minds of African people. I mean, even during chattel slavery, colonialism, right? During the era of American apartheid, here in the United States, and apartheid, in Azania, and into the current era where we see the fight over, what can be taught in schools, what books can be read. We even did a program uh, about a Black History Month display that was based on actual history being forced to be removed. So this is part of the process, I think, of where the United States is at this particular moment, in history. And we have these people that I call the new redeemers, uh, the people who lost the Civil War, organized to reinstate whatever system of control they possibly could after the war, and they called themselves redeemers. They said that they were launching a redemption campaign to recover what they had lost as a result of the Civil War, which forced the collapse of chattel slavery. And they were successful. The violent overthrow of Reconstruction, which also included uh, assaults on thriving economic Black communities in numerous places. Wilmington, North Carolina, here, in North Carolina, we in Elaine, Arkansas, uh, in Rosewood, Florida, for example, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so they launched this redemption campaign, and I think that this is part of the mentality that is driving what would otherwise can be considered to be just absolute insanity as to why. Now we understand why the United States government, led by, I think, the most destructive white supremacists of the 20th century in terms of African people in America, why J. Edgar Hoover would issue a memorandum in October of 1968 and say that we need to target these bookstores because they are a source of uh, radicalization. Black minds are being radicalized, by these bookstores. And so, of course, this started, with the COINTELPRO directives in 1967 and 1968, where Hoover said that uh, the leaders of at that particular moment, uh, Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, Martin Luther King, and others should be specifically targeted because of the threat they posed, and particularly with the influence they were having on African youth. So in October of 68, Hoover penned another memo warning of the urgent menace of a growing Black Power movement, but this time the director focused on the unlikeliest of public enemies, Black independent booksellers. In a one-page directive, Hoover noted with alarm a recent increase in the establishment of Black extremist bookstores. See, Hoover's using the term Black extremists back in 1968. Now, we've seen that resurface here in the 21st century, that term, Black extremists. Black extremist bookstores, which represent propaganda outlets for revolutionary and hate publications and culture centers for extremism. See, they cover all of the bases. They cover all of the bases. Outlets for revolutionary, and he's calling hate publications and culture centers. See, we made a tremendous mistake when we thought that there was that we were drawn into a conflict between people who call themselves cultural nationalists and revolutionary nationalists. And some people had this idea that if you are talking about culture, then you are reactionary, or you are they used the term back in the 1960s called armchair revolutionaries. They didn't understand that even the white supremacists said culture is extremely important. The director ordered each bureau office to locate and identify Black extremists and or African-type bookstores in its territory and open separate discrete investigations on each to determine if it is extremist in nature. Each investigation was to determine the identities of the owners, whether it is in a front for any group or foreign interest, whether individuals affiliated with the store engage in extremist activities, the number and type of books and material that are being sold, the store's financial conditions, its clientele, and whether it is used as a headquarters or meeting place. These people, when they are operating at the institutional level, which is why Dr. Wilson wanted us to focus on institutionalized white supremacy, not that we were ignoring the individual acts of white supremacy, like the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, but she wanted us to focus because she said it's within these institutions where the real power lies. Okay, perhaps most disturbing, Hoover wanted the Bureau to convince African American citizens presumably with pay or through extortion, to spy on these stores by posing as sympathetic customers or activists. This is Hoover quoting again. Investigations should be instituted on new stores when open, and you should recognize the excellent target these stores represent for penetration by racial sources, he ordered. Hoover, in short, expected agents to adopt the ruthless tactics of espionage and falsification they deployed against the civil rights and Black Power movements and use them against Black-owned bookstores. Now, I just wanted to cite that history because I don't think that that's necessarily what's taking place with the family that owns the Liberation Station bookstore in downtown Raleigh. But it's not beyond the realm of possibility that somebody somewhere says, we can't allow this type of thing to take hold, particularly when it seems that they have, such a firm grip on the minds of so many young Black people, at least, by their teen years, early teen years, sometimes even earlier, which is promoting them or driving them towards self-destruction. Okay, so they obviously consider this to be a source. Um, the uh, the sister indicated that they would simply be they were not closing. She started off by selling books out of the trunk of her car. They got a physical location, didn't see any problems until these threats started coming in. So now they're looking to move into a location where they'll feel more safe, and perhaps they can get more protection, perhaps from the community or somewhere. They're not closing, but they are being forced to relocate. And we wanted to bring this issue to the attention of the African world, particularly to the national Black community, here in the United States, but to the African world in general, just to understand the level, of power and threats that we're up against. Something as simple as selling a book, right? Or something as simple as you can't read this book, in a school, or you can't have up a display. You can't have a display that shows, how segregation, how American apartheid operated, with separate doors, one for white customers, one for Black customers. This is what we're dealing with at this particular moment in history, Brother Almost. And I just wanted to call that attention, uh, to our listeners, and I wanted also to connect them to the history, because we know a lot of our viewers are younger people, and they may not necessarily know this history. So it's our job, particularly my job as an elder, to transfer knowledge, the intergenerational transfer of knowledge, from one generation to the next. So that's why I wanted to discuss that.
So I was on mute there, but I was saying that the revolutionary literature has always been censored, going back to the book burnings and back, as we're showing here, the FBI war on Black-owned bookstores up until today, with information on social media, this Black bookstore, Children's Bookstore, being closed. Also, the attack that took place in the 80s and the 90s on the community, what Bobby Wright called the community, where you had a lot of Black lecturers that were banned from coming to different universities to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, this type of information is information that, of course, whites will feel threatened by, because it should threaten them. When Black people return to their culture, that culture acts as a protection mechanism from whites.
Right, right.
And in all honesty, we should be outlawing their information in the countries that we have control over, because their information is what leads to many of our people being, mentally brain dead and becoming uh, corrupt sellouts to their own nations. So whether it's their, religions, or their history, or their political propaganda, we need to start forcing an attack on their information in our countries and promoting our information over their information.
Yeah, brother, almost you've traveled all across the African continent, and you've often lamented the fact that in most of these countries you don't even have African-centered education
Hmm.
in schools on the African continent. I don't know what percentage of schools you could go in and ask a student, tell us about Narmer, and they would look at you like, what? And this is one thing I hope that President Faye and uh, President Traore and others will institute is African-centered education, because there's no Ron DeSantis there as an
Hmm.
obstacle. You may have a Bill and Melinda Gates obstacle, but you don't have a Ron DeSantis there. I just want to also mention one other thing here when Hoover was talking about whether these stores were being used, as centers for meetings and those kinds of things. The, during my early activism in the Black Liberation Movement, uh, bookstores were extremely important because when we formed study groups, we wanted to read all of the books written by Kwame Nkrumah. Where would we find those books? Well, in Atlanta, there was a bookstore called Timbuktu, the Market of New Africa. I have a number of books on my book shelf right now that I could pull out, and it would have the stamp in there, Timbuktu, Market of New Africa. Uh, when I was traveling, everybody told me you got to go to the Liberation Bookstore in Harlem. I think it was on Lenox Avenue, I believe. You got to go to the Liberation Bookstore. I couldn't I couldn't wait to get to Harlem. Went to the Liberation Bookstore. Unbelievable. My mind was literally blown away by the amount of information that was in. I spent every dime I had. Okay. No dates tonight. All the money's going to buy books. Here, uh, in North Carolina, the No Bookstore has been, a tremendous, valuable source of information. Brother Bruce Bridges, in out of Durham, North Carolina, and of course, at one point, he had a store here, a franchise here on Batersford Road, and our own good brother Gullah Jack was very much involved, and we used to hold forums, uh, lectures, in the No Bookstore on Batersford Road. So a lot of our people now have just gotten away. We're so reliant on information from social media, which if you are not cross-referencing material and doing a deep dive to validate where the information is coming from, you'll be led down a path and they'll have you believing that something is the total opposite of what is actually going on. So you know these this information is extremely important, and the fact that they would target this children's bookstore shows that the goal that Jigga Hoover laid out in COINTELPRO goal number 5 regarding an assault on the minds. We must control the minds of young African people. you know that's really and truly, I mean, even though the person that's doing this may or may not be someone that's connected at the institutional level, but I'm telling you, based on the history, they leave nothing to chance. So I hope the family is able to relocate. Hope the community protects them, from these threats, and that they continue to provide badly, sorely needed information, because our children need information beyond this garbage that they're getting off of social media.
For brothers and sisters, leave your comments down in the comment section. Give this video a thumbs up if you thought it was good. And definitely subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. We're closing in on reaching 1,000 subscribers. So help us get there so that we can spread this liberation information to our people that need it. Until next time, a Bibi for Hodier.
Be before Hodier.